Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Sakura looked down at her feet guiltily when she heard Kakashi's voice from the door. Sasuke had already been hard enough to face, and now here was the man who was to Sakura both sensei and Hokage, not to mention whom Sakura had cussed vividly at and blamed for her own mistakes last night coming to see her. What do you want? She heard Sasuke spit out rudely as he stood anchored in the doorway, arms crossed and looking as smug as Sakura had ever seen him. To see Sakura, of course. Another familiar voice called out cheerfully, and Sakura's eyes grew wide when she recognized Shizune's smiling speech. Pushing past the pissed-off Uchiha, Shizune squeezed between him and the crack in the door rather forcefully. Sometimes, Sakura could see characteristics of Lady Tsunade in the young woman who was also the Sannin's pupil. As Kakashi made his entrance, Sakura caught the annoyed look Sasuke was giving the Hokage. Kakashi awkwardly rubbed the back of his head before whispering, "She refused to be left behind." Shizune embraced Sakura immediately. "Sakura," Shizune said, holding Sakura at arm's length to look her up and down, "I am glad to see you are okay. You certainly had us all worried." Sakura tried to look apologetic, but tears sprang forward to her eyes. Shizune looked back at Kakashi worriedly, and in response, the Hokage made his way to them. Sakura wiped at her eyes and strengthened her resolve and looked up at Kakashi. It was time she owned up to her behavior the night before. "Lord Hokage," she began, placing her hands together and bowing before him. "None of that," Kakashi stuttered awkwardly, ducking to lift Sakura's chin up so she could meet his eyes. "I will always be sensei to you. Kakashi-sensei, I am extremely sorry for my conduct last night," she continued when he released her chin. "Please forgive me." She faintly recalled throwing glass bottles towards him and inwardly groaned. He was certain to be disappointed in her. Sakura had proven that she had a breaking point, a weakness. A ninja who showed weakness would not survive in this shinobi world. "We all have bad days," Kakashi began, standing beside her and placing a palm fixedly on her disheveled head. "Just ask Shizune," he added, gesturing in the surprised woman's direction, "she's had her share of drunken episodes too. Tsunade is my witness." "Kakashi!" Shizune cried out, raising her hands to cover her red face. Sakura smiled and Kakashi grinned back at her under his mask. "Yes, well," Shizune interjected, grabbing hold of Sakura's arm and taking her hand. "You can say that none of us are perfect. Sometimes we make unwise decisions which lead to more unwise decisions, and so on. What's important is that you are okay and that you know that none of this is your fault." Sakura nodded her head but didn't reply. She looked down at her feet again. Of all people, she should know what to expect being in the medical corps. She had witnessed so many deaths during the Fourth Shinobi World War, and here she was making a huge fuss over one child she barely knew. However, this was a suicide that Sakura believed she could have prevented if she had only done her job. Sakura looked over at Sasuke, who was now leaning against the wall, arms crossed and eyes closed. He had the same scowling look on his face that he always wore, eyebrows angling down to make a sharp V, and his mouth a hard, pursed line. Perhaps, if Sakura had just forgotten about him, hadn't made such a big fuss about his return, she could have done her job. Maybe this was why she was feeling so guilty. Sasuke spoke suddenly, his voice a grumble from across the room. "Why are you here?" All eyes turned to the forgotten ninja, a small silence falling upon them. "Ah," Kakashi spoke up, walking over to his moody student and placing a hand on his left shoulder. Sasuke glared at him. "Apologies for just showing up unannounced. We didn't interrupt anything, did we?" Sasuke's eyes grew wide at the comment and Sakura waved her hands frantically. "No, nothing," she said quickly, which seemed to make the Hokage's smile grow wider. This made Sakura's face turn almost the exact same shade as her hair color. Sakura caught Sasuke's eye and they both looked away hurriedly. "To answer your question, Sasuke," Kakashi said, code switching back to his Hokage speech and taking on his authoritative personality. We came for the both of you. We have some new residents in the village who need your medical attention, Sakura. Think you can help us out? Sakura looked over at her sensei who was looking at her expectantly. Shizune offered Sakura a smile of her own and Sakura nodded. It was time she got back to doing what she did best. Sakura caught Sasuke's gaze and she looked away. It was time she put her patience first in all matters, even matters concerning her heart. Sasuke had groaned inwardly when Kakashi proposed that they all go to the barracks to provide medical attention to the ninja Sasuke had rescued from the Colosseum. Sasuke had thought he had dodged this very situation the other day, and when he acted as if he were about to leave their group, Kakashi had spoken up, saying, "Why don't you come with us, Sasuke? I'm sure we can find something for you to do. After all, you're the reason they are here." Sasuke had grumbled under his breath, resentful for how many times Kakashi was going to remind him of that fact. This is what he got for helping people. Work, responsibility, and more work. Sasuke had gotten used to cleaning up a mess, wiping his hands spotless from it, and avoiding all aftereffects. That was one thing that Sasuke really liked about not being in the village. "You are?" Sakura had asked, turning to face him. Sasuke's stomach had pitched as a former concern entered his mind at her question. This is exactly what he had been trying to avoid yesterday. He didn't want to be there when Sakura was healing the injuries he was directly responsible for. Ever since the Uchiha had entered this village, everything was going exactly how he didn't want it to. Literally everything, and this was another example. Sasuke hadn't replied and instead Kakashi had spoken up on his behalf, not mentioning this most important detail. He skipped the part where Sasuke had directly attacked these ninja, instead just telling Sakura that he had rescued them. Sakura had looked down at her feet and smiled, which made Sasuke feel even more guilty. It was a lie, but he couldn't tell her the truth, just when she was starting to think well of him. At first, Sasuke had thought that the four of them would be working together, but 5 minutes into their walk, Shizune had departed for the hospital, and Kakashi had merely dropped them off at the door, saying, "I forgot that I had a meeting today. I'm late, so if you will excuse me." Sasuke had glowered at him as he placed a reassuring hand on each of their arms, saying, "I believe in you too," before walking away rather unhurriedly for someone who was late to a meeting. Now, Sasuke stood completely useless against a wall, offering no assistance as Sakura kindly tended to the people she was healing. She had seen almost every patient while Sasuke sat back and watched her. It was something that Sasuke had never seen her do before. She wasn't wearing her lab coat, but Sakura possessed a focused demeanor as she conducted checkups on all the ninja. It was strange to witness her apply knowledge that Sasuke hadn't been there to witness her gain. She had always been smart, smarter than him in almost all areas of knowledge at the academy. But the woman before him wasn't raising her finger to tell her teammates how much she knew, or chastising Naruto for how little he knew. The woman before him, currently stooped over a middle-aged man's back and using her chakra to draw out infection through a deep cut along his shoulder, was the Sakura he had missed out on. This was who Sakura was now, and Sasuke couldn't help but admire her. A tug on his shirt tore the Uchiha's gaze away from his pink-haired teammate and onto a small child who was looking up at him. "You Uchiha?" a little girl asked, crossing her arms in a challenge. Sasuke frowned down at her in reply. "Hatsuko," the man Sakura was healing hissed back at the girl, "Go back to your mother. Leave this man alone." Hatsuko ignored her father, and matched Sasuke's glare with one of her own. "Hurt my papa again, and you'll have to fight me," she yelled, punctuating her statement with a raised fist and a stuck-out tongue. Sasuke hurriedly snuck a glance at Sakura and flinched when her gaze landed on him, who obviously had not missed the exchange. He glared back at the child, not saying a word. "Hatsuko," her father roared, standing up hurriedly to walk in the child's direction. The little fiery juvenile sprinted off in another direction. This man saved me, he called after her, just as she slammed the door down the hall from them. Get back here and apologize. Wincing, the man grabbed his shoulder and Sakura rushed over to lead him back to his chair. Forgive me, he bowed towards Sasuke. My daughter is young and doesn't understand what you did for us. I'm the one who should be apologizing, the Uchiha said softly, feeling guilty and properly chastised by a little girl. For the first time, he walked over to the man and stood solemnly before him. Perhaps if I had thought more clearly, I could have found another way to. Don't blame yourself, young man, the ninja interrupted, flinching suddenly as Sakura tightly secured the final knot of his stitches. Clearing his throat, he continued, there was no other way. What you did for us is something to be proud of. We would all be stuck fighting for our lives in that hellish place if it weren't for you. We are all extremely grateful. Sasuke glanced over to Sakura. Now that the cut was now clean and freshly stitched, Sakura covered the wound with gauze and wrapped it securely with bandage wrap. You're all done, she stated, I'll be back in 10 days to remove the stitches. Make sure to keep the wound clean. Be gentle and apply fresh bandages every night, except for tonight. Yes ma'am, he said, standing and bowing graciously to Sasuke's teammate. I am grateful to you both. Konoha has some very fine ninja. It is thanks to you that I don't have to worry about being separated from my family or sold to another shinobi. You have brought me the peace of freedom, Uchiha Sasuke. As the man took his leave, he apologized once again for his daughter's behavior. After he was out of sight, he turned to Sakura, who was now cleaning up the stitching kit that was laid out across the counter. She pushed it carefully in a big yellow bag that she had brought along with her. Sakura picked it up and Sasuke closed his eyes when she walked past him out the door. She stopped to wait for him in the hall and he followed her until they were past all the people who stopped them and thanked them. Once out the door and into the darkness, Sasuke caught up with Sakura and took the bag out of her hand. It was the only polite thing he believed had ever done for anyone, probably ever in his life. Thank you, she said, surprised. A small smile touched her lips but Sasuke was absorbed in silence. Once they were alone together, walking the dark passageways to her apartment, Sasuke couldn't remain silent anymore and spat out, I know what you're thinking. Sakura peeked over at him as they walked, a look of confusion on her face. Almost like she wasn't expecting any kind of explanation from him about anything. You do. You must think I haven't changed at all, he said, looking away from her. She reached out and gently took his elbow, stopping them and turning him towards her slightly. He pulled back from her but didn't look away. That's not what I think, Sakura whispered to him. I think you are a hero for saving all of those people. But I hurt them, he said firmly, I'm still hurting innocent people. She was looking at him softly in response and Sasuke didn't know why, but he was suddenly angry at her for it. Was she still trying to justify his actions in her mind? Why was it so hard for her to hate him? You are being too hard on yourself, she offered kindly, touching his elbow again reassuringly. You've changed. What you did was for the best. She began walking again, but Sasuke dropped the yellow bag at his feet and quickly grabbed her sleeve, keeping her from moving. I can't let you walk away thinking good of me. I was angry when I fought them. Angry with Oyashiro and all the other ninja who had put them there. I had taken them down in the quickest way that I knew how. I fought children. Sasuke, she said seriously, picking her bag off the ground and slipping the handle in the crook of her arm. Before I ever was a medical ninja, I was your teammate. By healing them, I could recognize you in their injuries from the very beginning, but I was surprised not because I learned that you had done this, but surprised because of how careful you were with them when I know how hard that must have been while facing them all. Sasuke scowled at her. That's not an excuse. Sakura looked up at the sky as a faint light suddenly fell on them, and Sasuke followed her gaze. The moon was peeking out between two dark silvery clouds. He looked back down at her, staring at her as she watched the moon. Her face and hair lit up for a moment and she offered him a small smile in reply. I'm not someone to offer advice, but sometimes you have to hurt people in order to do what's best for them. It's a part of being a shinobi. I'm sure Itachi would agree. I think he would be proud of you, Sasuke. Sasuke's eyes grew wide at the mention of his brother's name. Did she mean him? Itachi had sacrificed everything, even his own happiness, in order to protect the village. He had killed their family and abandoned Sasuke. Is this what she meant? Her voice interrupted his thoughts as she said, let's forget the past. Let's learn from our mistakes and grow from them. I'm going to work towards becoming a stronger medic ninja for the village and you can work towards being the best shinobi that you can be. Can we do that together? Sasuke held her gaze, scowl remaining fixed on his face. The best shinobi that he could ever be, huh? Sasuke didn't know if that was a possibility, but he would try. He would do what was best for the village and the people he cared deeply about. Sasuke didn't answer her, but when Sakura tugged on his sleeve, he followed her. They spent the rest of the walk in silence. Sakura didn't release Sasuke's sleeve and he didn't pull away. It was a fragile moment, a moment that Sakura was afraid would break if she spoke or breathed too hard. Sasuke's right hand swung at his side, sleeve caught barely in her fingers. Sakura desperately wanted to grab his fingers, but she knew that would be crossing the line of whatever they had between them. Whenever they reached the door, Sakura released Sasuke's sleeve and walked in first, setting down her bag. I'll make you some tea, if you'd like. Or if you're too tired. Sakura, came from Sasuke's emotionless voice from outside the door. Sakura turned and realized that he didn't follow her in and her stomach lurched suddenly. Sakura walked back outside and looked up at him, worrying, settling heavily in her heart. What's wrong? She asked, trying to reach for his sleeve again. He pulled back this time and instead slowly placed his hand in his cloak and revealed something small. Sasuke held it out to her without looking at her, and Sakura took what she recognized to be the key she had given him. Was he really giving it back to her? Did this mean he was really leaving? We both know I can't stay here, Sasuke said, looking away from her. My answer is no. Sakura stared down at the key in her hand, and realized for the first time that Sasuke was saying goodbye. Sasuke wasn't just saying no to coming in. He was distancing himself. He was telling her no. Tears sprung to her eyes as she looked down at the ridiculous key. No to what, Sasuke? She whispered, as he turned away from her. Without a care, she walked in front of him, placing a palm on his chest. No to what? No to everything, he said, finally meeting her eyes, confirming her thoughts. I thought that we were growing closer. I thought that we could try, Sakura said desperately, trying to understand why he would do this. Why couldn't he just let her into his heart? After everything they had been through together, why did he not care for her in the same way that she cared for him? The most we will ever be is friends, Sakura, and that's all, he replied, and Sakura searched his features for any signs that would betray his words, but his face remained perfectly stoic and firm. His dark onyx eyes did not waver. I've already told you. I can't be the man you want me to be. I have a mission, a duty to protect this village, and so do you. You said it earlier. We can work towards our goals and become better shinobi for our village, Sasuke said plainly, and Sakura felt shocked at how he was using her own words against her. Tears began to roll down Sakura's cheeks and she wiped furiously at them, begging herself to stop. Be strong, she whispered to her pounding heart. It was a useless plea. I love you, Sasuke. I will wait for you. I know that we can make this work if. His right hand caught her arm and he pulled her towards him and Sakura froze. Gently, he held her before him, looking down at her and replying, I want you to stop waiting. I want you to move on with your life. Find someone who can give you the happiness you deserve. That person is never going to be me. Sasuke released her after a minute, and he turned away from her, showing her his back like he always did. The distance between them grew as he walked away. Sakura wanted to call out to him. She wanted Sasuke to know that she couldn't stop waiting for him. That there would never be anyone else. But instead, all she managed was to plead through her tears, "Please don't say goodbye. Please don't leave me alone again. You are breaking my heart." And then he was in front of her again, so quickly that Sakura had missed it when she blinked. She flinched when Sasuke reached out and placed two heavy fingertips against her forehead. After a second, his fingers moved to support her chin. "Sometimes you have to hurt people in order to do what's best for them," he whispered in that deep monotone voice that only belonged to him. When Sakura opened her eyes, he had disappeared into the surrounding darkness. Sasuke squinted when the morning light flickered into view above the tree line, illuminating his face and warming it instantly. Summer was definitely on its way now that May was just around the corner. It made nights spent in the forest like last night bearable. This morning was the 12th day that Sasuke was in Konoha. To Sasuke, that was 12 days that he had not been searching for any signs of the Otsutsuki clan. Last night, when he had seen the moon peek through the clouds, Sasuke's stomach had twisted. As he watched Sakura admire it, he couldn't help but despise it for what it reminded him of. Every day and every second that Sasuke wasted in this village, he felt like he was putting the village at risk. According to Chino, when the White Zetsu army had passed under the Valley of Hell, the remote canyon located in the land of hot water where Chino's clan had once resided, she had been able to indirectly read their minds, coming up with her own idea of the human bombs after having witnessed this. After Sasuke had defeated her, Chino had told him something else that had frightened Sasuke. The White Zetsu army had been expecting a threat greater than the allied shinobi forces. This almost confirmed Sasuke's theory, the theory that perhaps Kagaya had created the White Zetsu army to fight a force more powerful than herself. Sasuke was convinced that more of her kind was out there and they would be coming here. This is the information that he desperately needed to tell Naruto. Sasuke had to put Naruto on his guard without affecting the peace that currently existed between shinobi nations. And here Sasuke was, waiting rather impatiently on the ninja who could rival Sasuke's strength. Only together could they hope to defeat this threat. Perhaps if Sakura knew about all of this, she would be able to understand why Sasuke had to leave immediately. Sasuke had listened as she had confessed her love for him again last night. He had denied her, again. Sasuke was convinced that if he pushed and pushed and pushed Sakura away from him, she would eventually move on. He would force her to believe that there was nothing between them, spare her an eternity of disappointment, and do so by not returning any of her feelings. Did Sasuke even have any feelings for her? He most certainly couldn't deny that he did. She was the only woman that he could possibly have any feelings for. What was the difference between caring for someone and loving someone? Sasuke wasn't sure. All he knew was that it was difficult to walk away last night. It was hard to resist crossing that threshold and spending one more night in a safe place with someone he cared for. It required the better half of him to tell her that she needed to stop waiting for him and find some other man to love. Did this mean that he did love her? Sasuke held his head in his hand, a headache forming in his temples from the rough night's sleep. He silently cursed Naruto for taking his sweet time to return. Sasuke definitely wouldn't have slipped this far if Naruto had been here when he arrived. Sasuke needed him to return so he could do what he knew was the right thing. A family of his own was something that Sasuke had dreamed for at one point in his life, and before he had left the village, he had admitted to himself that he cared deeply for his pink-haired teammate. Now, despite all that he had been through, Sasuke had taken on his brother's legacy, a purpose that was more important than any dreams of a happy life filled with friends and possibly love. His friends deserved that dream, and Sasuke had to protect that future. It was with this train of thought that Sasuke jumped down from the tree that he had been sleeping in and made his way towards a small stream nearby. When Sasuke arrived, He speared one of the many fish teeming about the water's edge. Then, Sasuke summoned his hawk and watched as the bird flew into the air, spiraling and diving back down to land on its master's arm. Sasuke reached out and offered the small fish to the winged fowl, who gulped it down appreciatively. Sasuke reached into his hip pouch and pulled out a small note that he had composed last night, securing it to the hawk. Jumping back into the air, the bird flew off into the sunlight. Sakura picked herself up the following morning and made her way to the hospital. When she arrived, Sakura's assistant, Kirai, had made her way over to Sakura and bowed low before her, apologizing for her mistake in regards to the mental health ward. Sakura had helped her pupil off the ground and hugged her, telling Kirai that she was proud of her for trying to take charge in her absence and telling her that they would work harder together to ensure a better future for the hospital. Sakura began by seeing all of her mental health patients, young children who had been negatively affected by the war. She visited each and every one of them, counseling them and doing medical checkups on them. Several children from the Colosseum were also newly admitted into the mental health clinic, all of whom Sakura was glad to see didn't suffer from any Sasuke-inflicted injuries. It made forgetting him today a little easier. One little boy was passed to Sakura from an elderly member of her staff named Miho, whom Sakura had hired at the start of the clinic. He clung to Sakura's hip throughout the rest of her checkups, playing with her hair and crying every time Sakura placed him on the ground. It was hard for Sakura to release the child back into Miho's care, but Miho had whispered to him that she would take him to visit the koi in the small pond just outside the hospital, a promise to which the little boy skipped off merrily to. After seeing all of the children, Sakura attended to every single one of her burn patients. She surveyed the healing process and was impressed with how well the mixture had repaired their burnt skin with minimal scarring. Even the patients who had allergic reactions were doing well despite the entire ordeal. They even agreed to let Sakura try an altered version of the substance on their remaining burns, which Sakura had been able to develop by analyzing the patients and finding alternative ingredients to accommodate for their sensitivities. These burns began to heal very quickly and Sakura was able to reserve her chakra supply for other patients. Sakura grinned when the red-haired man named Haru Mizuno walked in, flashing her his Naruto-like smile. "I can't wait to get this off so I can go back to the sauna," he told her, sitting down on the exam table, holding out his green arm. As Sakura removed the herbal coating, revealing new skin with every peel, the young ninja made joke after joke in an attempt to make her laugh. He kept on insisting that he wanted to prove to her that he had a sense of humor. Despite her mind being filled with thoughts of Sasuke, Haru reminded her so much of Naruto that she found herself missing her obnoxious friend. Sakura also felt relieved just to laugh. It was like breaking the surface of water and taking a big gulp of fresh air after being under for so long. Her smiling only encouraged Haru and he continued to try to make her laugh. "I'm very grateful," he said to her after she washed away the last of the herbs from his arm. Sakura expressed her appreciation for his kind words and walked him out of the room. Haru began to walk away only to turn quickly on his heel and offer Sakura a nervous grin as he walked back up to her. "Before I go," he said shyly, rubbing the back of his neck quickly, "I just want you to know that I think you are really great. And I'd like to do something for you, to pay you back for everything that you've done for me." Sakura stared up at him in silent surprise and he quickly added, "It doesn't have to be a date, unless you'd like it to be I would like it to be." He stopped and looked away. Because of his confidence throughout the whole exam, Sakura would not have expected for him to be so bashful now. It took Sakura a second to realize that he was actually asking her out on a date. Sakura's face turned red and she simply said, "Oh. Haru interjected, rubbing a large hand through his red hair. "Only if you want to." Sakura began, trying to find the right words to say. She remembered another time where she found herself in a similar situation. A man whom Sakura had healed during the Fourth Shinobi World War had written her a letter and confessed his love for her. She had told him no, much like Sasuke had told her no last night. It was sad really, that Sakura denied others for Sasuke who in return denied her. Find someone who can give you the happiness you deserve. Sakura replayed Sasuke's words in her mind, hating every syllable of that sentence. Is that really what he wanted? Sasuke claimed that he wanted her to move on and there was a man who was offering her that start. What if she said yes? Would Sasuke be satisfied then? Sighing in defeat, Sakura replied, I'm sorry, but I actually have someone already who I care deeply for. It was almost embarrassing how easily and genuinely Sakura admitted it. Oh, Haru muttered quickly, offering an apologetic smile and closing his eyes. That's unfortunate, I mean for me that is. Well, anyway, just thank you for everything. I wish you the best happiness, with whoever he is. Thank you for everything. Sakura's heart skipped at those familiar words, but frowned because it wasn't Sasuke who had said them. She was hopeless. Sakura was foolish if she believed there would ever be anyone else. Thank you, she said quietly, offering her own small, awkward apology. I wish you the best happiness as well. I'll be seeing you. Off to the sauna. I go, he said, walking away with fabricated relaxation, crossing his arms behind his head and taking exaggerated steps while whistling. The behavior was so like Naruto that she couldn't help but smile sadly. Unlike Naruto, Sakura didn't know how to get through to Sasuke. She had never been able to. Naruto, on the other hand, had a way of making Sasuke understand things. He always knew what to say to him. Maybe she should be more like Naruto. So what would Naruto do? How would he make Sasuke understand? And then Sakura's shift was over and she helped the rest of the staff settle things for the evening. Afterwards, Sakura found herself walking decidedly toward the Uchiha compound. Be bold, she told herself. Be bold. Sasuke stood on the small boardwalk where he had learned how to do the fireball jutsu from his father, staring down into the water of the river that it connected to. Memories returned to the Uchiha. He pushed the painful memories of sitting all alone at the edge of this very dock after his clan's death, thoughts of bitter vengeance running through his mind. Instead, Sasuke recalled the many nights he had spent here practicing the fireball jutsu, focusing on the memory of his father saying, "That's my boy." What would his father say to Sasuke now? Would he look at him with thoughts filled with Itachi? Would he be disappointed by everything that Sasuke had done? Would he be proud of him? Sasuke wasn't sure. Now, as he stared into the orange-tinted water, it seemed as if the entire lake was on fire. Sasuke stared out at the bright circular sun that dipped low in the sky, lowering behind the trees of the forest on the other side of the water. Sasuke felt the urge to try to beat the sun's heat. Arching his back and leaning his head back, Sasuke quickly made a stream of familiar hand signs, completing them with a tiger, and filled his lungs with the air around him until he couldn't inhale anymore. Then, with everything he had, he exhaled a fiery ball that blocked his view of the sun. The water spilt, recoiling and twisting away from the fire that he breathed, and Sasuke couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as the blazing orb expanded to cover the entire surface of the water, almost reaching the bank on the other side. After a few seconds, Sasuke straightened and watched as the spherical inferno dispersed into small embers that hovered in the air before him. Steam from the water rose up to catch them and they went out. The evening sun was still burning, a fire larger than any Sasuke could ever hope to execute. He smiled in defeat. Damn sun. Suddenly, Sasuke felt the boardwalk shift slightly and he looked over his shoulder at the person who had just walked out onto it. It was Sakura. She wasn't looking at him, and Sasuke noticed that she was wearing her lab coat. She must have just gotten off work. Why on earth was she here? Sasuke made an audible sigh of annoyance and turned to look back at the water. This was the last thing he wanted right now. He had only just gotten her out of his mind and now she was here. It annoyed the Uchiha to no end. What did he have to do to make her understand him? What do you want, Sakura? He spat out harshly. Here to confess your love, again. He made sure to make the comment sting. It was time for this to end. Yes, she said with steady conviction, and Sasuke frowned immediately. And I'm not going to stop. I'm going to tell you however many times it takes. Sasuke spun with a growl, but it was replaced with an expression of wide-eyed surprise when he stood facing a large tree that was propelling swiftly towards him. It was so unexpected that it was nearly to him before he could react. He immediately dropped to his palms, scarcely evading the massive trunk as it passed over his back. In a push-up position, Sasuke immediately looked under his right armpit to see the tree land out in the river behind him, causing a tsunami of water to rise up on all sides of it as it sank. The water swelled beneath the boardwalk and curled around its edges, splashing and soaking the bent-down Uchiha. Snapping his head back to Sakura, he stared at her in exasperated disbelief. She had just thrown a tree at him. What the hell was that for? He yelled at her, rising to his feet and glaring at her. Why did you just do that? Sakura smirked and Sasuke watched as she slid off her lab coat and pulled down her hair. Reaching into her hip pouch, Sakura pulled out 2 black leather gloves. Sasuke raised a watchful eyebrow as she pulled them on tightly, tugging down on the glove of her right hand firmly, which was raised to make a fist. Because apparently the only way to make you listen is to fight you, she replied with a grin, walking down the boardwalk towards him. Maybe if I beat you within an inch of your life, like Naruto did, then I will get through to you. Sasuke ran his fingers through his now wet hair that was hanging down from the weight of the river water. He stared at his pink-haired teammate in astonishment as she walked towards him, hands fisted at her sides as she came down the boardwalk. This is ridiculous, he spat at her quickly, not sure of what he was supposed to do in this situation. Sasuke would be the first to admit that he rather enjoyed sparring and would love for the opportunity to battle with Naruto again, or even Kakashi. But Sakura, the last time he had gone toe-to-toe with her, they had both meant to kill each other. That was the only time that he had challenged her and he regretted it every time he looked into her face. Sasuke didn't like the idea of going up against her at all, simply because it went against every instinct in his body. Sakura was someone that he had once, and now again, considered very dear to him. Before Sasuke had deserted the village, he had always been there to protect Sakura, not fight her. I'm not going to fight you, he said rigidly as she got closer and closer. Then he saw her right fist begin to glow and she started to run at him, gaining momentum with each step. You don't really have a choice, she yelled, pulling back her fist, and aiming for his face. Sasuke's eyes grew wide when she didn't pull her punch. He instantly jumped into the air, barely dodging her blow. He watched from above as Sakura's weight carried her out onto the water. The kunoichi instantly spun on the lake's orange surface, reaching into her weapon's pouch, and throwing shuriken up into the air towards him. To Sasuke's surprise, these were also true to their mark and Sasuke had barely managed to spin in the air fast enough to avoid the first 2, but one got close enough to deeply cut the top of his left shoulder. Sasuke winced and landed on his feet on the water next to her, channeling chakra instinctively to the soles of his feet. Angry now, he grabbed her wrist and tried to pin her arm behind her back, much like he had done to her a few nights ago in her office. However, she was less compliant this time, soaked with slippery water, and with one less arm to secure his hold, he couldn't maintain a grip as she spun out of it. Sakura grabbed down hard onto his forearm and Sasuke cussed internally at the sheer strength of her hold. He managed to catch one small smirk from his teammate before she had both hands on his arm, and was swinging him up and out into the air before her. Sasuke collided not too graciously with the water and he skipped across it like a rock. He sent chakra to his palms and grabbed onto the waves that rose up around him. Sasuke managed to stop his momentum and he spun on his palms, pushing against the water's rocky surface and landing back down on his feet. That was it. He was thoroughly pissed now. Rising to stand fully, he activated his Sharingan and sent his teammate a heated red and purple glare. Dot 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 dot. Sakura crossed her arms in triumphant satisfaction at Sasuke's leveled stare. She tried not to waver at the crimson and violet eyes that fell upon her. Instead, she looked down at Sasuke's feet, like she often did when sparring against Kakashi. The Sharingan wasn't something Sakura was fearless of, being as it was one of the most powerful Kekkei Genkai that was renowned throughout the shinobi world as one of the three great dojutsu. His other eye was also classified as such, and it terrified Sakura even more, simply because she had witnessed the power of the Rinnegan through the Akatsuki's many demonstrations. And then there was Madara. How she would battle that type of power, she wasn't sure. On the other hand, Sakura was proud of herself for being able to incite this type of reaction out of Sasuke. This is exactly what she wanted. Glad to know you're taking me seriously now, she taunted. Suddenly, his feet moved, and Sakura jumped back as he lunged towards her. Damn it. He was a lot quicker than she expected, and he caught hold of her waist and threw her down into the water, the both of them now submerging into the lake's murky depths. Sakura reached forward, then sent her elbow back into his side. Even underwater, Sakura's strength was immense, and the Uchiha grunted when she made contact with his ribs. He released her and she made a break for the water's surface. She inhaled sharply when she emerged. Kneeling on the water's surface, she looked down to find Sasuke. But when she looked up, he was already before her, standing above her and looking down at her. Before she could react, Sasuke had a hold of her arm and he pulled her up to look at him. She closed her eyes when she met his, hoping it wasn't too late. Sakura had her defenses up. If he caught her in a genjutsu, she was certain that she would know. His grip was unyielding as she tried to pull away from him. Enough of this. He hissed at her. What are you going to accomplish by this? Sakura stopped struggling long enough to answer him. She opened her eyes and glared at his chest when she answered, I'm going to make you understand. Then, to punctuate her statement, she headbutted him. Hard. Neither of them were wearing their forehead protectors, so the impact of their skulls was brutal. After a dazed second, Sasuke bounced back from the hit, and Sakura had already pulled back her fist to strike him. She missed, aimed again with her other fist, and watched as her fist slid past Sasuke's cheek as he dodged again. Sakura continued to take shots at him, each unsuccessful as the Uchiha backed and ducked away from her. Blasted Sharingan. She would be lucky if she even managed to graze him. Sasuke remained solely on the defensive the entire time Sakura drove him back towards the forest on the other side of the lake. He eluded every punch and kick she threw at him, but never tried to strike her back. His sword still hung limply at his side and his fingers didn't even twitch to make a hand sign. This infuriated Sakura. Sasuke was barely exerting himself. She had managed to piss him off just enough to engage in combat with him, but she would have to take it to the next step before he would fight her with any real intent. She continued to swing, jabbing faster and faster, using every spiraling kick and punch she had in her book. And of course, Sasuke was still managing to evade her every move. She was hoping that if she continued to apply the pressure thick enough, he would eventually have to strike back. This reminded her of her fight with Kido. Sakura had repeatedly hit the man who had kidnapped her in an attempt to draw Sasuke back to the village in order to steal the Sharingan. During her battle with him, he had taunted her about Sasuke as she tried to land a solid blow against the unwavering tailed beat chakra that he wore as a cloak. No matter how many times you try, the result is always the same, he had told her as her punches did no damage to his defenses. At the time, he had been referring to her attacks, but Sakura couldn't help but think of his remarks in relation to her unrewarded feelings for Sasuke. She had told him countless times how much she loved him, and not once had he reciprocated her feelings. She had been victorious in her fight with Kido and had convinced herself that, like with that fight, she wouldn't give up on her feelings for Sasuke. It didn't matter how many times she was going to have to tell him, she loved him. She loved him with everything that was in her. Sakura wasn't simply going to tell him that anymore. She was going to make him understand once and for all, even if that meant having to pulverize him. Dot 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 dot. Even with his Sharingan, Sasuke was barely managing to avoid any of Sakura's ferocious blows. He knew that the instant she managed to land a hit, he would be done for. Sakura had already cracked a few of his ribs, and with each turn his body made, pain exploded in his side. Not to mention, that she had almost knocked him unconscious with that headbutt. Sasuke gritted his teeth at the pain in his side and head and contemplated how to stop her merciless stream of blows without hurting her. He couldn't bring himself to throw any hits back, or use his ninjutsu against her. If she would only look into his eyes, he might be able to place a genjutsu on her, but she was being tactful by completely avoiding them, predicting his attack solely from the movement of his feet. She could have only learned this from Kakashi. He was impressed at how successfully she was managing to pull this off. Sakura was skillfully pushing him back and he raised his arms against her blows. He learned pretty quickly that even this was risky, considering her superior strength. Any contact at all sent vibrations through his bones, so Sasuke tried to avoid her reaches altogether. His foot touched solid ground finally, cueing Sasuke that they had reached the bank on the other side of the river. Just as he backed into the woods, he managed to slip behind a tree just in time for her next blow. Of course, the tree splintered and broke under her chakra-infused punch. The collapsing tree reminded Sasuke why it was important to not slip up even once. The moment he did, it would be over. He bounded into the treetops and Sakura scanned the ground around her. She had momentarily lost sight of him when she had bounded away from the tree. It didn't take her long to find him, because she caught his eyes. This time, she didn't look away. Just as he was about to place her in a genjutsu, she spoke. Fight back, she yelled up at him, her voice filled with anger. Sasuke saw the emotion in her green eyes. It took his pounding head and throbbing side to remind him that he was thoroughly annoyed with her. I can't. He growled down at her. She suddenly kicked the tree he was standing in and Sasuke had to jump to the next one to avoid crumbling down with it. At this rate, she was going to destroy the entire forest. She was no longer making eye contact with him, and Sasuke grunted. He had missed his opportunity and he wasn't going to be able to use the Sharingan on her as long as she avoided his gaze. He was going to have to make her look at him. Sasuke suddenly reached into his weapon pouch and crouched. He waited until she appeared in the tree beside him and then he sent rigged shuriken into the air around her. Sakura looked around in surprise as Sasuke yanked back on the wire strings that were attached to the shuriken that made full circles around her. He pulled again forcefully, and the wires tightened around her body, jerking her back against the tree. Successfully tying her to the tree, he watched for a few seconds as Sakura struggled to free herself. Sasuke made his way towards her and crouched in front of her. You need to stop this and listen to me. She looked away from him, still avoiding his eyes. Let me go. Not until you've calmed down, he stated firmly. A smirk touched her features and Sasuke instantly frowned. Calm down. I'm just getting fired up. Sakura, he warned. But before he could tell her how ridiculous she was being, an explosion erupted from somewhere behind him. Sasuke turned instantly and watched as a trail of paper bombs began to ignite. One by one, they were detonating closer and closer to where they were. He spotted the last one just a couple of feet away from him. When had she? Releasing the wire that kept them both attached to the tree, Sasuke grabbed Sakura with his one arm and dove out of the tree just seconds before it exploded into a million pieces. You're crazy. He yelled as he tried to keep a firm hold on her in the air. It was difficult considering the wood and fire that was hailing them now. She managed to raise her knee between her stomach and Sasuke's chest. Sasuke tried to tighten his grip, but her foot came next and she kicked away from him. They both successfully landed on their feet next to each other. A shadow covered them and Sasuke looked up to see the treetop crashing its way down on them. It fell quickly and Sasuke reacted on instinct. Summoning his chakra, he formed his hand signs and yanked out his katana. He ran his Chidori down the blade and sliced through the air. The tree split and collapsed on either side of them. Sakura had gawked as Sasuke split the tree with his Chidori. Now, the tree top created walls around them and Sasuke turned and glared at her with those powerful eyes. In that moment, he was seriously a fearsome sight to behold and it made Sakura rethink her entire plan. How far was she willing to go to piss him off? You're taking this way too far, he growled seriously, taking a step towards her. I have to make you understand, she said as he took another step. It's the only way. Understand what, Sakura? He asked heatedly, taking yet another step. Understand how much I love you. She yelled, sending her chakra fist in the ground between them. She heard Sasuke curse as the ground rose beneath him. Bounding back from the split tree and collapsing floor, Sakura lost eyesight of the Uchiha in the rubble. The landscape was now a disaster, and it had all been her. Sasuke had yet to send an attack her way. And then she heard him, in the shadows of the trees behind her. How the hell did he manage to pop up out of nowhere? He was running very quickly towards her, a shadow in the shadows. Sasuke lunged for her and she turned and ran. Grabbing hold of a low branch, Sakura swung up into another tree, bounding from limb to limb until she had reached her maximum speed. Sasuke was right behind her, keeping up with her. She could practically feel his fingers grazing her back as he reached out to grab her. And then suddenly, he was stepping out of a swirling vortex just in front of her. He had suddenly appeared there. Of course, he was teleporting. That explained how he was appearing from nowhere. Was this the power of the Rinnegan? Sakura had bounded from the last limb a little too early. She reached back her arm, letting her thrust carry her through the air towards him. Shanaru! She yelled as her fist connected with his side. A loud crack resounded in the air and Sakura smiled. After a second, however, Sakura realized that it wasn't Sasuke that she had hit. Instead, her fist had connected with the purple rib cage of Sasuke's partially formed Susanoo. The skeletal chakra arm reached out and snatched her, picking her up off the ground. Sakura tried to break free, but the grip was too strong and she stopped trying altogether when she met Sasuke's fiery eyes. How many times do I have to tell you that I refuse to stay in this village and play at love with you? Fighting me isn't going to change my mind. Find someone else. Sakura resisted the tears that sprung to her eyes. There were those words again. Those heartbreaking words that made Sakura want to cry. Playing at love, she yelled. Do you think that's what I am doing? Sasuke didn't respond, but he didn't release her either. You want me to move on? She yelled again. Is that what you really want me to do, Sasuke? Again, no response. You want me to fall in love with someone else? Do you want me to play at love with Lee, or Kiba, or Shino, or some other random person you don't even know? Sasuke frowned at her. He narrowed his eyes at her words. Yes, he finally replied, looking away from her. Sakura glared down at him. Sasuke poured more chakra into his Susanoo as Sakura pushed against his avatar's fingers. Damn woman and her ridiculous inhuman strength. When would she give up? Get it through your head, she said through her teeth as she flexed her arms out. There's never going to be anyone else. His Susanoo arm brought her closer to him, and this time Sakura looked at him squarely in the eyes despite his Sharingan and Rinnegan eyes. He matched her scowl. Both of them were so stubborn. He was angry with Sakura. Angry that she had caused him to exhaust his visual prowess. Angry about the pain in his forehead and side. Angry that she had brought this bothersome subject up, again. Sasuke couldn't admit to Sakura that it bothered him to imagine her with someone else. There was a part of him that longed for a family of his own. Sasuke had been beating back this part of himself ever since he set his feet in this damn village. Maybe it had taken this fight to make Sasuke realize that his feelings for Sakura ran deeper than he had thought. How else could he explain why he had absolutely zero desire to fight her back, or the way his vision had gone slightly red when she mentioned Lee's, Kiba's, and Shino's names so easily in reference? Did Sasuke love Sakura? Maybe he did. But how much? It would be selfish of him to accept her feelings. It would be cruel of him to take what she so freely offered and then leave her behind. If he loved her, he wouldn't do that. Right. Slowly, he placed her gently back down until she was on her 2 feet again. Enough. No more fighting, he pleaded as the Susanoo disappeared into the air around them. Tell me that you understand first, she said undecidedly. It seemed she wasn't sure whether or not their fight should end. Understand what? Other than that you're not going to stop ringing my ears with your nonsense. Sasuke sat down on the branch that currently supported them, leaning his back against the tree and clutching his side. Sakura strode over towards him. Crouching beside him, she reached for his shirt and Sasuke tried not to pull away when she lifted it. He winced when her fingers grazed his cracked ribs. He cursed under his breath when he saw the explosion of purple that was forming under his skin and then exhaled when Sakura's palm began to glow green. It was impressive that she had any chakra left to spare. Did you really have to do that? He groaned as she slowly mended the bone. That was uncalled for. Let's just say you're lucky that I hit you underwater. With an elbow, she replied, and Sasuke glared at her devious grin. If you think that pummeling me is going to change my mind about leaving, he began, but was cut off as she looked up into his eyes. Sasuke leaned his head forward so that his hair hung over his Rinnegan eye. His other eye turned back to Onyx. I don't expect you to stay here and play at love, she said softly. Sasuke looked away. All I would need to know is that you love me back, she continued gently. We don't have to be together to love each other, Sasuke. Their eyes met at that statement, but Sasuke broke and looked down at her glowing palm instead. That's a miserable life, don't you think? He grunted. A pain went through his side and he winced. It was hard enough for the Uchiha to even talk about things like this, not to mention that she had her bare hand against his side while he spoke. She finished and carefully pulled down his shirt. Then, she moved to his cut arm and her fingers began to glow again. You can decide that you don't love me. You can decide to leave this village and never return my feelings. But you're not going to walk away thinking that if you do, I'll move on. Is that clear? He grunted again. Good. I'm glad you get it now. She offered him a small smile before turning her attention back to his arm. You didn't have to break my ribs to tell me that, he glared at her. After the wound was healed, she placed her palms on her hips. Well, you are kind of stubborn, she said. And you're annoying. Sasuke watched as Sakura finished healing the long cut on his shoulder. The glow around her fingers subsided, and as she lifted her hand, Sasuke instantly noticed that the cut had completely vanished, not even a faint scar left behind. Along with the wound, the pain vanished as well. He tried hard not to move away when she reached for his blackening temple and left eye. Her headbutt had nearly knocked him unconscious, and Sasuke couldn't imagine how he must look after such a blow. Sakura's own forehead was quickly darkening and Sasuke frowned at the bruise. Damn woman and her reckless strength and large forehead. Sasuke's eyes widened when Sakura reached out and tenderly brushed his bangs away from his left eye. For some reason, it unnerved Sasuke for her to see his Rinnegan, and he suddenly wished the swelling was much worse so it would completely cover it. If Sakura sensed his unease, she didn't let on and instead cupped his chin firmly with her other palm. Sorry about that, she commented quietly. The good news is that your skin and Rinnegan match now. Saskia just scowled at her. He deadpanned. She thought she was so clever. But before the relief of her glowing green fingers could brush against his rapidly swelling goose egg, Sakura suddenly swung around at the sound of someone landing on the branch beside them. On instinct, Sasuke stood immediately and placed himself between Sakura and the three ninja that had just joined them, reaching for the katana at his waist. Sasuke relaxed when he recognized the familiar porcelain animal faces belonging to the Hidden Leaf Sanbu. What do you want? He spat towards their lofty location. The ninja exchanged glances before each taking on displeased positions, crossing their arms over their chests. Sakura moved ahead of him and quickly asked, "Is there something wrong?" As if she didn't know the answer to that question already. One of the Anbu, a petite kunoichi with a fox mask, gestured to their surroundings with the wave of her arm. We were sent here to investigate the disturbance occurring in this area, but we didn't expect the source of such a problem to come from the Hokage's very own students. The taller, lanky Anbu spoke next, pointing at Sasuke's position on the opposite branch. Sasuke glared at him when he said, "Him maybe. But not you, Haruno-san." Sakura just rubbed the back of her head sheepishly. "Ha ha, well you see." She was promptly interrupted by the third Anbu, who swiftly pulled a kunai from his weapons pouch and aimed it at Sasuke. Sasuke's skin prickled and he sneered at the man, who was now walking towards them. Uchiha's hand itched for his sword again. This bastard. Did he really think that he could possibly take him on? Anbu or not, Sasuke would not let this ninja near either of them. "No no," Sakura exclaimed, waving her hands back and forth, "just some training." Sasuke scoffed and stood up straighter. Training? His ass. Like anyone would believe that after looking at the destroyed wasteland around them. One of the Anbu, the tall one, let out a laugh. "Looks like you were the winner, Sakura." Sasuke frowned. Or maybe they were gullible after all. Sakura giggled and Sasuke shot her a look of annoyance when she said, "You guessed right. We'll report to the Hokage what we have found here," the female Anbu said formally, unwavering from her serious persona. She disappeared then, the tall Anbu following her cue and vanishing as well. The third Anbu remained, the one who had directed his kunai in Sasuke's direction. The ninja had bright orange hair that reminded the Uchiha of Jugo. Burn scars covered his exposed right arm, and Sasuke's stomach knotted when he realized why the young man had been suspicious of him. This ninja must be one of Chino's burn victims that Sakura had mentioned. Although Sasuke wasn't directly responsible for this man's injury, Sasuke couldn't help but feel guilty. The young man was watching the both of them intently, and Sasuke noticed how Sakura was focusing her gaze slightly away from him. Why was that? For some reason, the behavior bothered him. "There's something else you might like to know, Haruno-san," the man finally spoke softly. Sakura raised her eyes to him and Sasuke's glower vanished when he heard the ninja's next words. "Uzumaki Naruto has returned to the village. He's looking for you. .. Kakashi tried not to roll his eyes at the blonde ninja who was furiously suggesting that Kakashi treat the three of his former students to ramen at Ichiraku. Ever since Naruto had returned with the rest of his Kumogakure-bound caravan, Kakashi had had zero silence. It had been 15 minutes of non-stop questions about Sasuke. When had he returned? Why now? Why hadn't Naruto been told about this while he was away? Where was Sakura? How come she didn't try to contact him? Finally, to get the kid to relent, Kakashi mentioned ramen in an attempt to detour his thinking. Now, Kakashi found that he was being driven mad over a new topic. Ramen. It would never end. It will be like old times. The ninja elbowed him for the fourth time. I can't remember the last time we all ate together. This is one of the many times that Kakashi was appreciative of the mask concealing his face. Naruto would have little idea how big of a frown he was shooting him. Ever since Kakashi had become Hokage, it seemed that everyone believed for some reason that he was loaded or entitled to whatever he wanted, as if nothing had a price where the Hokage was concerned. When, in fact, neither was the case. Every time someone ran into him, it was, "Oh, it's the Hokage. He wouldn't mind treating us." This was especially true concerning Guy, Naruto, and believe it or not, Choji. Sometimes, Shikamaru was a part of this freeloading gang. This was just one of the many downsides of being Hokage. Kakashi couldn't wait for retirement. He was getting too old for all of this stuff. After a few seconds, Kakashi relented against Naruto's pleading and sighed. All right, he finally agreed, reaching the bar that announced across the hanging tapestries. But only just this once, since it's a special occasion. Naruto guffawed and marched into the ramen bar. Kakashi couldn't hold back the smile that came so readily to his lips. The Rokudaime was also looking forward to this moment. It had been too long since he had rendezvoused with the former members of Team 7. Well, the last time since they weren't trying to all kill each other, that is. And just as Kakashi had that thought, a silent Anbu with orange hair appeared beside him. It was one of the trio from the team he had sent to deal with a situation that had been reported on the outskirts of the village. What did you find? He asked the young man quietly so Naruto couldn't hear him above his loud conversation with Tsuki, the owner of Ichiraku. Your students, actually. Kakashi's eyes grew wide. What? Anbu nodded once and continued, they claim they were training, but it seems like they were trying to kill each other. They should be here any minute. Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. After a few seconds, he said, thank you. You're dismissed, and the Anbu vanished into the air. Kill each other. Kakashi had never expected such a thing to happen between those two. When he had gotten the dispatch that there were earth tremors coming from the Uchiha district, he had crossed his fingers and sent a squad of Anbu out to investigate. Without a doubt, his first suspicion was of Sasuke, but as he contemplated, Kakashi just didn't understand why the Uchiha would be causing such havoc. He was more likely to believe some random ninja with anti-Uchiha philosophies was suddenly making an attack on the land. But now, it seemed his previous assumption was closer to the mark. Kakashi wasn't sure what role Sakura had to play in this, but from the report, it seemed she was the one responsible for most of the devastation. Why would they want to kill one another? Surely, it wasn't as serious as it seemed. Only a few seconds later did Kakashi notice the two familiar figures of his students making their way down the main street. They caught sight of him immediately and made their slow way towards him. When they stopped a few feet in front of him, Kakashi crossed his arms at the sight of their disheveled outlines and bruised faces. Sakura's forehead was darkening, but it was nothing compared to the explosion of color that was blooming across Sasuke's left temple and eye. He had a large knot that was growing bigger by the second. It was a small injury considering the many Sasuke Uchiha had probably had in his lifetime, but it still looked murderous. Sakura was grinning guiltily at him, blushing and looking appropriately sorry. Sasuke stood without any shame whatsoever, looking at Kakashi with little interest. Kakashi scowled at the two of them, hoping his mask wouldn't conceal too much of what he was hoping to communicate. You two have some explaining to do. Sakura started to speak but was instantly cut off when Naruto bounded back out of the ramen shop. Sakura-chan, he yelled, coming towards their group. Sasuke. Good to see you. Took your time getting here, Sasuke said indignantly as the ninja bounded up to him. Naruto slowed in his greeting when he caught sight of his dark-haired teammate's current state, looking intently at Sasuke's rapidly swelling face. What the hell happened to you? He exclaimed. Neither Sasuke, Sakura, or Kakashi spoke first. Naruto continued, who did that to you, Sasuke? Who'd you fight? Where's the other guy? I bet he looks worse. Two other size matched Kakashi's as the three of them shared the same thought about their blonde friend. What an idiot. Naruto's imagination ran away with him as he rambled on, slapping Sasuke on the back of the shoulder. It had to have been somebody really strong for them to have to be able to hit you like that. Who was it? Kakashi looked over at Sakura, who was practically boiling now. Naruto's stupidity was unchallenged sometimes. Naruto elbowed Sasuke with a smile. Don't tell me you sparred with Lee while I was gone. I can't believe I missed that fight. Sasuke scoffed and turned his head. There's no way in hell I'd let that loser get one on me. Kakashi shook his head. He felt like they were both missing the point here. Kiba. No, wait, it must have been Kakashi. Naruto pointed at his white-haired sensei. Unlikely, was Sasuke's blunt reply, and Kakashi couldn't help but flash Uchiha an affronted look. That's when Sakura lost it. She grabbed onto the fool's collar and began to thrash him about angrily. I'm going to give you a black eye to match, if you don't stop being such a blundering idiot. And here I was excited for you to come home. Wah wah, Naruto yelled, his head whipping around violently. What did I do, Sakura-chan? She dropped him, stepped over him dramatically, and stormed into the ramen bar, leaving the rest of her team behind. They all winced when they heard her sit roughly down at the bar and angrily place her order. Kakashi helped Naruto up, whose eyes were like spinning saucers. What did I say? He asked nauseously. Apparently, Kakashi locked eyes with Sasuke. Sakura is the one who got the better of Sasuke. What? Naruto snapped out of his daze. Sasuke, you bastard. You fought with Sakura. Why the hell did you do that? Sasuke glared at him as best as he could with one eye. She attacked me, you loser. What did you do? Why I oughta. Enough, Kakashi intervened, grabbing Naruto from behind and pushing the two of them through the tapestries and into the ramen shop. Sakura sat on the far right, creating enough steam to compete with the ramen she was viciously slurping down. Kakashi took the seat beside her when Naruto and Sasuke froze in their spots. They both looked at him gratefully as they took the two seats left of him. Hokage-sama, the ramen maker exclaimed, marveling at the four of them. What a surprise. I haven't had the opportunity to serve this motley crew in quite some time. Yes, it has been a while, Kakashi replied kindly, offering him a smile. My treat tonight, he added, gesturing to the three of his ragged students. Naruto seemed to forget his anger and shouted at Chuki that he wanted 3 orders of extra large pork miso ramen with extra pork. After they ordered, Naruto began to ask Sasuke question after question about his travels, to which Sasuke grunted in reply every now and then. Kakashi noticed that Sakura's mood seemed to lighten considerably at the familiar chatter between them. Then, Naruto told them all about Kumogakure and how he had gotten to battle with Killer Bee and how Lady Tsunade threw a fit about his resulting injuries. I guess I shouldn't have been so reckless, Naruto added, rubbing the back of his head, but it was totally worth it. At that moment, Sakura suddenly stood and said, Lady Tsunade. She must be back, as well. I need to see her immediately. She stood up quickly and said, Please excuse me. Naruto stood and yelled after her as she ran out of the shop, Wait, Sakura-chan. We only just got here. We haven't even. Just let her go. Kakashi placed a hand on his shoulder. A lot has happened. Like what? He demanded, looking between the two of them. Kakashi didn't miss how Sasuke had suddenly stopped eating, and was watching the swaying draperies that Sakura had just run through. He caught Kakashi's eyes and turned back around. And besides, Kakashi continued, ignoring Naruto's question. I think there's something Sasuke has been waiting to talk to the two of us about, anyway. Sasuke frowned when the two of them placed their gazes onto him. Dot. Sakura dashed towards the hospital in the darkness. How she had any energy left after fighting Sasuke was a mystery to her. The lights from the shops illuminated the street, making it easy for her to avoid people and place leveled steps. Sakura needed to see her teacher. She needed to apologize for the mess she made of everything while she was away. She needed to tell her what happened from her own mouth. She just needed someone to talk to about this. Sliding through the glass doors of the hospital's front entrance, Sakura was instantly met by her own pupil, Kirai. Sakura-sensei. Did Lady Tsunade come here? She demanded, avoiding the worried gazes from her coworkers and staff. She's upstairs, ma'am, but, Kirai began, but didn't get the chance to finish before Sakura was bounding up the stairs. Any minute now and she would see Tsunade. She would tell her how she didn't think she was up to being the head of Konoha's medical corps. When she reached the top of the stairs, Sakura could hear the lady's voice coming from down the hall. Sakura didn't stop. She walked until she reached the last door. It's still a little early, Tia Senowade was saying, so I'm surprised we can see anything at all. Without hesitation, Sakura opened the door and walked inside. Lady Tsunade, she began, but stopped short when she saw what was happening before her. Hinata was in the room, as well. She was laying down on a cot, with her shirt lifted. Tsunade was standing over her, placing a white probe on her abdomen. On a screen, half concealed by Tsunade's body, there was a black and white image displayed. Sakura. Hinata gasped, sitting up. Sakura. Tsunade chided, you know better than to barge. I'm so sorry. Sakura blurted, covering her eyes, I didn't mean to intrude. No, it's okay. Hinata smiled shyly. Come see, Sakura. Sakura's knees wobbled at the scene, and she was suddenly overcome with emotion. Hinata, are you your? She couldn't say the word. She couldn't make herself believe the image that she had caught a glimpse of on the LCD display. Tsunade grabbed her hand tenderly and brought her over to them. Here, she said, handing Sakura the ultrasound's transducer. See for yourself. You need practice with this new machine anyway. Sakura tenderly placed the probe back onto Hinata's belly and began searching. Tsunade pointed to a little black circle that moved onto the screen. It's barely visible, but it's there. Congratulations, Hinata. You're going to be a mother. Tears of joy flooded Sakura's green eyes, spilling onto her cheeks and running down her chin. Hinata, she cried. I can't believe it. I am so happy. She hugged the dark-haired girl firmly, and tears sprang to Hinata's eyes as well. Does Naruto know? Sakura suddenly asked, pulling back to look at her friend. Took him long enough to figure it out, Tsunade interrupted, but he knows. He found out on the mission. The ultrasound just confirms it. Poor Naruto, Hinata mewed. I have been unbearable to him the past 2 weeks. What do you expect from a pregnant woman who's dealing with morning sickness while traveling? Tsunade was comforted. Sakura giggled, picturing clueless Naruto trying to make sense of his struggling and temperamental wife. After Hinata left, Sakura followed Tsunade to her office. Sakura had butterflies in her stomach and had been too distracted by Hinata's news to remember her previous train of thought. It was Tsunade who brought it up. I heard what happened, Sanin said quietly. Kakashi wrote to me. Sakura froze at her words, the delight suddenly sapped out of her. I failed. Sakura, Tsunade exclaimed, turning to her student and wrapping her in an embrace. You are not to blame for any of it. A new wave of tears returned to Sakura's eyes as she gripped tightly to her sensei. What do I do? It's so hard. What did I expect in rescuing these children and bringing them here? It's still developing, Sakura, her sensei reassured her. You can't let this one incident overshadow all the good that has come from the mental health clinic you've developed. But I've been distracted, I didn't do enough. Sakura had to make Tsunade understand that if she hadn't been so preoccupied with thoughts of Sasuke, then maybe she could have done more. Tsunade sat with her on a bench in the 2 chairs adjacent to her desk. According to Kakashi, you have been doing more than enough in my absence. Sakura, don't put so much responsibility on your shoulders. You are human. But you, Sakura refuted, wanting to tell her how Tsunade could have been able to save the child if she would have been here instead. Or also human, Tsunade finished for her. Hell, when I was your age, I abandoned the Leaf Village and went off to occupy myself with gambling and liquor. You're doing more than I ever did. Sakura looked down at their joined hands. Tsunade always had a way of making her feel encouraged. Even when she failed repeatedly, Tsunade was always there to support her, even if it was considered tough love. Maybe that's what you need, Tsunade added. Sakura shot her a confused look and Tsunade continued. A vacation. Oh no, Sakura exclaimed. I couldn't leave you here. Not after having started the mental health clinic. That's my responsibility. PSSSH, what are a couple of kids that I can't manage? Tsunade laughed. Seriously, go on a vacation. Go represent Konoha and open other mental health clinics in other villages. You know, like you did with the Sand Village. Get a little drunk while you're at it. It's good for the soul. Sakura didn't know what to say. She couldn't leave the village now, could she? Not when her patients needed her. Not when she just got the mental health clinic established. Not when Sasuke, the love of her life, was now here. She frowned as her thoughts turned again to him. For how long? How long, now that Naruto has come home? Speaking of liquor, Tsunade's voice grew angry. I heard about what you did. You owe me a new alcohol collection. Sakura clasped her hands together in apology and blushed at the recollection of her drunken behavior. Forgive me, Lady Tsunade. I wasn't myself. Did you get drunk? Tsunade asked bluntly, cutting Sakura's explanation short. Maybe a little, Sakura replied, face red in embarrassment. She was going to get walloped in the head any minute now. The blonde Sannin just grinned instead. Well then it was worth it. I'm so proud of you. You're becoming more like me every day. Sakura grimaced. Maybe she did need a vacation. Suddenly, Tsunade grabbed the girl by the chin. Heaven's child, what happened to your face? Sakura smirked. I did it. I told Sasuke how I felt about him. I gave it to him loud and clear. Tsunade beamed proudly and then placed her palm gently on her student's forehead, fingers glowing. It's about damn time. Sasuke and Naruto sat on the roof of the Hokage's tower, looking down at the glowing lights of the village. After Sakura had left them, Kakashi, Naruto, and he had walked here so they could speak in confidentiality. Once they were enclosed within the Hokage's office, Sasuke had begun to tell them everything he knew about Kagaya, including what new information he learned from Chino in regards to Kagaya's army. What do you mean? A force more powerful than herself? What does that mean? Naruto asked, pacing the room. I'm not sure, Sasuke affirmed. My theory is that Kagaya didn't create the White Zetsu to fight the allied shinobi in the war. I believe there's something bigger out there. Something more dangerous. The three of them exchanged glances. Kakashi sat in his chair, hand under his chin in quiet contemplation. Sasuke had secretly been hoping they would be able to debunk his theory, to dissect it and find that it was faulty and find it untrue. But neither of them said anything and stared back at Sasuke with fearful eyes. Finally, Kakashi spoke. You're saying that you think there's more of the Otsutsuki clan out there that we don't know about? And that they pose a threat to the village? What about Tonari? Naruto suddenly asked, and Sasuke looked at him with confusion. I mean, he was an Otsutsuki that came to Earth in order to get the Byakugan. Could he have been the threat she was so afraid of? Tonari. Yes, Sasuke remembered that name being mentioned by Kakashi through correspondence. He was one of the direct descendants of Homura Otsutsuki, a son of Kagaya who colonized the moon. Tonari was the one whom Naruto, Hinata, Shikamaru, Sai, and Sakura had to chase to the moon in order to rescue Hinata's little sister, Hanabi. Tonari had been defeated and was left on the moon to ensure it never approached Earth again. Sasuke walked to the window to think back to Kakashi and Naruto. Tonari couldn't be the threat if he was a descendant of Homura. According to Hagoromo, the Sage of Six Paths, Kaguya had begun to prepare the White Zetsu army long before her sons betrayed her. She had to have been afraid that someone more powerful would come after her chakra. Her sons inherited chakra, so neither of them, or their descendants, could be the force she was afraid of. There had to be someone else. Someone much worse. Sasuke relayed this to them, and watched as they exchanged glances. Should we arrange a 5-cage summit? Kakashi asked. No, Sasuke replied quickly. I want to do some more investigation myself, first. I could be wrong about all of this, so there's no reason to alarm everyone just yet. Now, after this conversation, he and Naruto sat on the top of the Hokage's building. Sasuke gazed down at the village below him, which was glowing with evening lights. He was amazed at all the technological advancements that were starting to be incorporated into the village. Electricity had made a huge development, and was becoming more common in the typical household. Sasuke wondered what the future of this village might be in just a few years. Naruto, who was leaning his back against the railing next to him, peered up at the faces carved into the mountainside. He was looking at the fourth Hokage's face with a strange acuteness, as if he was trying to tell the deceased man something important. After a few seconds, Naruto turned back around, and rested his elbows on the railing. So, how long are you staying? Sasuke smirked. You know that I can't stay. I've stayed long enough waiting on your slow ass. Naruto laughed for a second before resolving into seriousness. He had a tendency to do that whenever it was just the two of them. So what's the plan? Sasuke didn't mind letting Naruto in on his next steps. Despite his idiocy, sometimes Naruto could offer helpful counsel. I've requested permission to return to Sunagaku to pick up my search there. I'm waiting for clearance from the cage. Naruto nodded. It seemed he didn't have any better suggestions. After a second, he just said, don't stay away so long, this time. Don't forget where your home is. I'm staying away to protect it, was Sasuke's blunt answer. He didn't understand why Naruto and Sakura couldn't come to terms with this one simple fact. Naruto chuckled, as if the conversation should stay lighthearted. He changed the subject. Your face looks awful, Sasuke. Did you insult her? I try to avoid Sakura's bad side. She's going to murder me with that monster strength someday, I'm sure of it. The Uchiha grunted in response. Sasuke didn't know what to say. He'd rather not tell Naruto the nature of his fight with Sakura earlier this evening. He was just glad Naruto was finally back so that he could leave this damn place. He was tired of the mental war that was going on inside his head, here. The village was contagious, and he needed to get away from it. What's going on with you two? Naruto asked directly, and Sasuke flinched. Nothing that concerns you, he spat out icily. His left cheek was beginning to swell, and Sasuke winced at the pain he felt when he talked. Naruto frowned at him, becoming more intent by the second. What did Kakashi mean by, a lot has happened? Sasuke shot him a glare. Just mind your own business, loser. Naruto was determined to get some answers, but his voice softened. Is Sakura okay? Just tell me that. Sasuke came up short. The insult he had prepared died on his lips. Sasuke wasn't sure whether Sakura was okay or not. He had tried to help her after her incident with the death of her patient, but Sasuke wasn't the ideal person for that sort of thing. If Naruto had been here, he would have done a better job. Now that Tsunade was back, Sasuke was sure that she was probably the one who could help Sakura the most. Sakura had practically stormed out of Ichiraku to find the blonde Sannin. I think so, was all Sasuke could offer. Naruto just nodded. After a few seconds, Naruto stretched and put his arms behind his head, smiling, a familiar gesture Sasuke had seen a million times. Hinata and I were going to have a baby. Sasuke turned to look Naruto squarely in the face. His teammate was grinning so wide, Sasuke thought his lips would split. Sasuke couldn't believe his ears. Not only was Naruto married, but he was expecting a child, now. How could that be? Sasuke couldn't imagine the knucklehead with a miniature Naruto on his shoulders. Congratulations, Sasuke said, adding a bit of kindness to his usually monotone voice. I'm happy, Sasuke. I'm going to have a family. He clapped Sasuke on the shoulder before adding, you know, I want to see my friends happy, too. Sasuke felt joy, jealousy, and sadness all at the same time. He knew what Naruto wanted for Sakura. What must it be like to come home to someone every night? He remembered Sakura's words to him earlier today, all I would need to know is that you love me back. His heart ached. Sasuke's mind wandered suddenly and he couldn't shut out the images of raven-haired children playing at his own feet. But then those visions changed from laughing children to screaming ones, and Sasuke shuddered at the thought. What if they were taken from him? What if, because of who he was, his family would be targeted and killed? He couldn't even think about such things. A family would only cause him pain. Sasuke stood up straight, and walked over to the large claw-like pillar jutting up from the rooftop and leaned his shoulder against it. He turned his back on Naruto. I don't want a family. Naruto didn't move closer, giving Sasuke his space, but he crossed his arms over his chest and spoke louder, you think you're fooling me with that, but I know you, Sasuke. I may be clueless about a lot of things, but I know you're not such a heartless guy anymore. I know you care. I can see it on your face. It's not going to kill you to open your heart. Sasuke's temper flared like the inferno inside of him and he turned on Naruto, raising his voice, and then what? What happens when I lose those close to me again? What will keep me from the darkness? From choosing the path of revenge? I will, he answered seriously, almost invincibly. I'll stop you. Sasuke just shook his head. He knew that the minute someone killed someone he cared about, again, there would be no stopping him. Instead, he asked, how can you promise that nothing will happen? Naruto walked over to Sasuke then, and gave him a slight shove in the shoulder with his fist. There was a confidence in Naruto's eyes that Sasuke recognized. It was the same look that had once annoyed the hell out of the Uchiha, but eventually saved him. If you believe in my dream, then fight for the future we have striven for. Help me ensure the peace of the next generation, and nothing will take your family away from you, Sasuke. Sasuke looked down at his feet. Kagaya's face flashed in his mind and Sasuke's sudden hope at Naruto's words dwindled. It was like a vicious cycle. Sasuke had to kill this new danger in order to guarantee the peace Naruto talked about. To do that, Sasuke would have to give up his personal life here in the village so he could find and eliminate the threat of the Otsutsuki race. No matter how he looked at it, Sasuke would have to fight for this bright future that Naruto envisioned, but have no part in it. Itachi's words came into Sasuke's mind, and they beat throughout his body with every drum of his heart. Self-sacrifice. A nameless shinobi who protects peace within its shadow. That is a true shinobi. I'll fight for this future, Sasuke stated, unwavering in his firmness. My resolve to protect this village is stronger than ever. In order to do that, I can't share in your happiness, Naruto. Naruto sighed and looked down at his feet, as if he had said the wrong thing and wished he could take back his words. Sasuke walked to the edge of the building once more, and peered over the side again at the home he was giving up. Without looking back, this is wonderful, Sakura, Tsunade exclaimed as she evaluated the effects of Sakura's newly developed burn medicine. The former Hokage was flipping through the files of Sakura's burn victims, assessing Sakura's detailed descriptions of their injuries as well as their reactions to both the medicine and Sakura's chakra treatments. Thank you, my lady, Sakura smiled bashfully at her sensei's praise. I am hoping to develop more medicine in the future, in order to help more patients without the use of chakra for every injury. Tsunade looked up at her after hearing her statement. She pinched her chin and looked up, pondering. That's brilliant. If we could develop medicine that reacted quickly to smaller injuries, we could potentially reserve chakra and treat more patients. Yes, that's exactly what Sakura was thinking. During her sensei's absence, Sakura had struggled to make up for the combined chakra supply that Lady Tsunade and the other traveling medic ninja provided at the hospital. Without their help, Sakura had drained herself completely every day, stretching herself so thin that Sakura had had a hard time replenishing her own chakra before the beginning of each day. With medicine like this, perhaps they could reserve their chakra over longer periods of time and potentially double their patient intake, like Tsunade said. Sakura carefully picked up the jar of medicine she had saved from the batch she created. Removing the lid, she dipped a finger into the green herbal solution. She extended it out towards her sensei. Something I also discovered was that this particular medicine responded to my chakra. Tsunade shot up an inquisitive eyebrow, placing back down the files. What do you mean? Well, Sakura began, sending chakra to her finger. It began glowing green under the medicine. After some testing, I found that if I applied chakra to the medicine, it hardened. She demonstrated this for her sensei, who widened her eyes as the gunk on her finger solidified into a small shell, completely encasing her finger. Sakura picked at it to reveal that no amount of scratching or tampering could remove it. What if we could develop medicine that was enhanced with the application of chakra? Sakura thought out loud, sending chakra back to her finger to liquefy the substance back into its original state. That's ingenious, Tsunade exclaimed. Can you imagine the possibilities? They were both grinning like mad. It had been too long since Sakura had obsessed over medical things with her teacher. When they put their minds together like this, Sakura often felt like there was nothing they couldn't do. Getting a little ahead of herself, Sakura blurted, "For the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to." Sakura, Tsunade interrupted, walking over to her and placing a hand on her student's shoulder. It was the third time she had done this since Sakura had come to see her after eating ramen with Team 7. After Tsunade healed Sakura's forehead, Sakura had begun to fill her in on every detail that had happened at the hospital since her departure. Her burn patients were something she couldn't wait to get to. She was just about to tell Tsunade about all her plans for the hospital and the mental health clinic, when she was suddenly interrupted. What is it? Sakura asked timidly, looking worriedly at her sensei. Tsunade sighed and cupped her hands together. Actually, I've been thinking about what I said earlier about a vacation for you. It took Sakura a long second before she understood what she was saying. You were serious about that? Tsunade looked away guiltily. After Kakashi's correspondence during my mission, I have been worried about you. You deserve a break. If you'd like, I could submit a request for a mission for you. An excuse to get you out of this village. There was a mixture of feelings that swelled up in Sakura's chest. She was confused. Tsunade had been serious about her leaving. Sakura couldn't help but feel a little hurt as she stared blankly at Tsunade. But why did Tsunade want to be rid of her? Suddenly, she couldn't hold back the tears that suddenly came to her eyes. You want me to leave? She squeaked, her composure shattering. I mean, I know messed up, but No, her sensei began, taking Sakura's hands into hers. I'm not disappointed in you. I want you to go and do something. If just for a little while. Sakura blinked away her tears but was still confused. How could she possibly leave now? Not only did her mental health clinic patients need her, but how would Tsunade keep up with it all without her? She would essentially be abandoning them. Sakura started to shake her head, fumbling with her words. But I don't think I can't just leave the clinic. Stop right there, Tsunade interrupted. What good can you do, Sakura, if you're not taking care of yourself first? That comment stung a little. She blamed herself for not pushing herself harder and getting distracted by Sasuke, and here was Tsunade telling her that she was doing too much and needed a distraction. These patients are important to me, Sakura began again, hoping that her dedication and resolve could be expressed in these words. She cherished these patients, she was responsible for them. They needed her, didn't they? After a few seconds, Sakura looked down at her hands. The green mixture still covered her finger. But where would I go? What would I do? My dear girl, Tsunade said in her gentle but stern voice. You have so much potential. I want you to go out into the world and change it. Get away from this place for a while. I know I certainly did when I was your age. But instead of gambling and drinking like me, well, drink a little, go open some more clinics and raise mental health awareness. Go deliver your medicine and mentor ninja in other villages. Sakura thought about it for a long minute. How could she be expected to go out and change the world when she had failed in her own village? How could she even think about leaving? Then, she suddenly had another thought. Maybe they were better off without her. Maybe she wasn't what was best for the village at this point in her life. Maybe she could focus on herself for just once in her life and come back to the village with new experiences and knowledge, come back rejuvenated. These thoughts were selfish of her and she started to shake her head. I don't know, Lady Tsunade, Sakura said, locating a rag on a cart nearby and wiping her green hand on it. It's so sudden. It's up to you. I want you to do what's best for you, she said, walking over and placing her hands on her hips and leaning toward her. Think about it and get back to me. Comma. Naruto ducked his head as he made his way towards Sakura's apartment. It was the one place left he was hoping she'd be. He had already tried the hospital and Granny Tsunade had informed him that she had just left. He sighed nervously. Naruto hadn't gotten the chance to tell her about his big news. He hoped she wasn't still mad at him earlier. Naruto silently chastised himself. Perhaps he really needed to work on not jumping to conclusions and sticking his foot in his mouth, especially when it concerned Sakura. She really was going to be the death of him someday. But it wasn't his news he was so uneasy about telling her. Sasuke had only just informed him a few moments ago that he was leaving the village, now that he had had the chance to discuss the new information regarding the White Zetsu army with Kakashi and himself. Tomorrow? Naruto questioned. But that's so soon. Sasuke kept his back to Naruto, a dark figure in the night outlined against the village lights. There's nothing left for me to do here, he remarked distantly. Naruto had wanted nothing more than to convince him to stay, to hook his arm around his friend's neck, tell him he could stay for a few days to catch up on all the sparring they were behind on. Maybe drag him back to Ichiraku's and insist the Uchiha owed him a free bowl of ramen, for losing their last fight. But the situation wasn't so simple. Sasuke had a mission that only he could complete with his Rinnegan. Sasuke was right when he said earlier that every day he remained here was a risk to the village. Standing, his friend came to a stop beside him so that they were standing shoulder to shoulder, each facing the opposite direction. I'll let you and Kakashi know if I discover anything else. And then he started to walk away. Turning, Naruto laughed. Is that a goodbye? Sasuke stopped walking but didn't turn when he responded, congratulations again. Your future is bright. I aim to keep it that way. For everyone. Wait. Naruto said quickly. This was goodbye, and Naruto wasn't ready for it. He was never ready for it. He wanted to say something. Something that would help Naruto feel like his friend was living a meaningful life, not one of loneliness. Sasuke froze again when Naruto said, I'm sorry it has to be you. I truly am. I want you to have a bright future, too. There was no response for a long moment, and Naruto thought that maybe Sasuke wasn't going to say anything at all. Naruto sighed, resigned to say something else but was surprised when Sasuke finally responded. Tell Sakura that I'm sorry for everything. Tell her that I have to do this. Naruto hung his jaw and shook his head, before spitting out, come on man. You should tell her that yourself. Go and at least say goodbye. It's for the best, he said quickly, monotoned and serious. Naruto knew there would be no arguing with him. Unlike Sasuke, he didn't see how it was the best to leave without saying goodbye. They both knew how she would take it, and Naruto couldn't bear to see her brokenness after finding out he had left without a word to her. Naruto had sighed and Sasuke disappeared into the night. Goodbye. Sasuke, he said to the wind. Now, fist in his pockets, he stared dejectedly at the lights coming from Sakura's windows. He raised his hand and rapped his knuckles against the door. He heard a crash and laughed silently to himself when he heard Sakura curse at a stool. The door opened, and Naruto flashed his pink-haired teammate the largest half-moon grin his facial features could manage. Naruto, she exclaimed, opening the door wider. A smile broke across her face as tears suddenly came to her eyes. Naruto raised his hands in the air, confused when her arms wrapped tightly around his chest. She was suddenly squeezing the breath from his lungs as tears trailed down her face. Sakura, he choked out, face turning purple, your strength hurting me, he choked out. After releasing him, she held him back at arm's length and continued to cry. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. I can't believe you're going to be a dad. Oh, he released a sigh of relief. He suddenly turned giddy at the reminder of his big news. How'd you find out? I saw Hinata, she said excitedly, pulling him through the archway of her doorframe. At the hospital. That's right. He suddenly remembered how Hinata was heading there with Granny Tsunade first thing once they got back. Naruto was glad that Sakura had been there for the visit, to be a part of it. He was glad Hinata was the one that had gotten to tell her, even if he was a little disappointed to not have gotten to see Sakura's initial reaction. He'd have to have Hinata tell him how it all went down. His pregnant wife was probably waiting for him right now, as they spoke. Sakura was suddenly pouring him a cup of hot tea as she raved about how excited she was to be an aunt. Naruto took the cup she offered and listened as she continued to lecture him on how to treat a pregnant woman, both emotionally and medically. She was saying something about swelling feet and cravings. Naruto found it difficult to take it all in as he stared at her with his eyes wide and mouth open. Can you write that all down for me? She rolled her eyes, but then grinned at him. It's going to be great. I'm so excited for you, Naruto. A baby is going to bring so much joy and happiness into your life. You deserve it. He cheesed and nodded, laughing while rubbing the back of his head. Yeah. Suddenly Naruto was thinking about her words as she looked off into the distance. She said that the baby would bring him happiness. My resolve to protect this village is stronger than ever. In order to do that, I can't share in your happiness, Naruto. Your future is bright. I aim to keep it that way. For everyone. Sasuke's words burned in Naruto's thoughts. He looked away from Sakura guiltily. He was suddenly remembering how he had once promised her that he would bring Sasuke back to the village for good. Even though Sasuke had returned to them, he still wasn't home to stay. Sakura, he began, unsure of how best to relay her Sasuke's message. About Sasuke. Her smile and crinkled eyes faded. A frown and worried brow replaced them. She looked down into her cup. You talked to him? Yes. He tried to sound lighthearted. Naruto really didn't know how to put things in a way that wasn't so blunt and insensitive. If anyone deserved happiness, it was Sakura. How could he tell her that the love of her life was giving up on his own future filled with happiness all for the sake of the village of future with her? It seemed Sasuke was the only one who thought that she could have a happy life without him, but Naruto knew the truth. Sometimes on the rare occasion when he wasn't being so dense and unaware, Naruto could see how Sasuke's absence affected her. She would look longingly at her friends who were happy, and whenever Sasuke's name came up in conversation, she would suddenly grow silent. Naruto felt selfish, basking in his own joy when all he wanted was to see his friends as happy as he was. He's leaving, I know, Sakura whispered and looked back up to meet his eyes. He nodded in response. Setting her empty cup on the table they sat around, she asked, I'm assuming that he's leaving very soon. Tomorrow, Naruto spoke hesitantly, flinching at his own words. Sakura frowned, looked away and blinked hard, as if she were processing the word and questioning it, as if she were confused. Naruto wasn't sure what happened between them while he was away, but it seemed as if Sakura were expecting this news already, as if she wasn't surprised at how soon he was leaving. Naruto hoped that this was the response he continued to receive as he began to tell her the rest of the message. It would be very nice not to piss her off and end up thrown through a wall tonight. He told me to tell you that he's sorry. That he has to do this, Naruto blurted nervously, and Sakura gaped at him, which made him duck his head. Her sudden glare at the wall was making his gut tighten. Naruto suddenly put a palm to his head, looking up at the ceiling. Gah. I'm sorry, Sakura. I tried to convince him, and then under his breath, why do I always end up putting myself in near-death situations like this? She stood suddenly, which made him flinch and throw up his arms. Kindly taking his empty cup from his hands, she smiled at him, which made Naruto both skeptical and worried. Thank you for coming and telling me that. It means a lot. Sakura. Naruto began again, trying to explain Sasuke's actions. Trying to come up with some justifiable excuse as to why it had to be him instead of Sasuke to tell her this. Naruto understood Sasuke better than a lot of people, maybe even better than Sakura. Sasuke was always that person with the drive to get things done, and even obsessing over it until he had accomplished his goal. This was true concerning Sasuke's revenge against Itachi, revenge against the Leaf, and now unlocking the secrets of the Otsutsuki race in order to protect the village. This was another goal, and Naruto wondered if Sasuke's habit of excluding his friends would always be a constant in his missions. How could he explain this to Sakura? How could Naruto best make her understand his closest friend? But then Sakura said something that made Naruto second-guess himself in the matter of who in Team 7 understood Sasuke the most. If Sasuke is already saying goodbye, then he's not leaving tomorrow. Sasuke couldn't wait to walk out of those village gates and be gone from this place. He had missed his freedom, those wide-open skies that left Sasuke feeling like he was someone else. Even though the village was dear to him, when Sasuke was surrounded by those walls with the cage's faces peering down at him from the mountain, the Uchiha couldn't help but remember who he was. In the village, Sasuke was the only survivor of the Uchiha massacre. He was the convict that killed, murdered, and betrayed his village. He was the one who had tried to defeat the Hokage. Sasuke told Naruto he was leaving tomorrow. This wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the entire truth either. Sasuke had told his dearest friend goodbye in a way. He had also told him to tell Sakura his farewell, too. Sasuke seriously hoped she would understand why it was best that he left without seeing her. It would be less painful, he had hoped. But Sasuke knew that he was also chickening out. To be honest, he didn't want to see her face when he told her goodbye, or watch her cry, or listen to her pleads for him to stay. He had already told her everything he had needed to. Because of this thinking, Sasuke decided to leave at 2 in the morning. He knew it was just the right time to leave without anyone noticing his departure. He didn't like the idea of running into someone he knew or didn't care for and small talk his way into an explanation, even if he didn't owe one. The truth was, he was avoiding everyone he cared for. Sasuke didn't like greetings, and he certainly didn't like goodbyes. It was easier this way, to leave in the middle of the night. By the time someone thought to look for him or question his whereabouts, he would be gone. Sasuke wouldn't have to deal with the responsibilities of goodbyes. Walking down the path towards the village gates, Sasuke reached up and fingered the large knot that was still bulging from his eye. He stopped, suddenly, remembering his conversation with Sakura after their fight. All I would need to know is that you love me back. We don't have to be together to love each other, Sasuke. He frowned, gritting his teeth against the weakness in his heart. She had told him that if he left, she wouldn't move on. Sasuke hoped that it was a lie. He didn't tell her that he loved her. Sasuke hated the idea of telling her about the feelings that had begun to strangle his good senses ever since he set foot back in this stifling village. He was afraid to give her hope. Afraid to sentence Sakura to a life of longing and waiting on him because she knew he had feelings for her. No matter how he looked at it, a lonely life was a loveless life. No, he would never tell her he loved her. Sasuke looked down at his feet, surprised that they weren't moving. Why was he stopping? Why did he care? The Sasuke from a couple years ago wouldn't be thinking how he was now, with sadness in his heart combined with happiness for his friend who was expecting his first child. Sasuke sighed, determination creeping back into his core. He had to protect them, all of them: Naruto, his wife, and future child, Sakura and her obnoxious blonde friend, Kakashi and his future retirement, everyone Sasuke had ever known. He wanted them all to be happy, even if he couldn't. He walked for a long while, resolving himself to his duty and mission. He repeated Itachi's words throughout his head, as if it were a chant he cited going into battle: self-sacrifice. A nameless shinobi who protects peace within its shadow. That is a true shinobi. Sasuke felt pride for his brother. He would be a true shinobi, like Itachi. Diluting the darkness, the full moon peeked out from the clouds. The crickets were loud, and the only other noise Sasuke could hear were the pats of his own feet against the road's cobblestone. He passed the swing in front of the academy and stared at it momentarily before walking on. Coming around the bend on the only road out of the village, Sasuke halted just before he reached the stone bench on his right. Standing quietly in the middle of the path was the same girl he left all those years ago. The same girl who was going to dare Sasuke to make the same decision again, the decision to leave her behind. Sakura watched as Sasuke's distinct figure came around the corner. Even in the faint light, she could recognize that outline anywhere. He was walking slowly, on the only road out of the village. She had been right to come here. He really was leaving. It took the Uchiha a minute to notice her. When he did, Sasuke stopped mid-step beside the bench that Sakura had been left on all those years ago. She prepared herself. She was not going to be that same girl. Sighing, Sasuke pinched the bridge of his nose. What are you doing out here in the middle of the night? Taking a second to hold together her determination, she frowned at his comment. She tried to keep the crack out of her voice when she spoke. I thought we had agreed you were going to stop dodging me. I thought we had an understanding. He didn't reply. Sakura tried to calm her terribly beating heart. Tears were already threatening to come to her eyes, and she chastised herself for them. Stupid girl, she thought to herself, and held them back. Sakura was not going to cry. Not again. She was going to be strong. You haven't changed, she stated unhappily, and Sasuke blinked hard at her comment, raising wide eyes to meet hers. You still won't tell me anything, she continued determinedly, doing her best to say what she felt. You can't even say goodbye. She was suddenly remembering what she had cried out to him the last time they stood together on this path. Why don't you ever tell me anything? Sakura was half expecting the same cold response from him that Sasuke had spat out at her. Why should I have to tell you anything? The rough whispered apology that Sasuke gave her instead was the last thing she was expecting. You're right, he spoke guiltily, looking away from her and letting out a sigh. I'm sorry. It's better this way. It's easier. Softening slightly, Sakura made her way towards him until she was standing only a few feet away from him. Easier? For who, Sasuke? You. She swallowed the lump in her throat, stilling herself to finish. Because there's nothing easy about this for me. Sasuke flinched and averted his gaze again. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to avoid this. She reached for his sleeve like she had that night in the alley. She had to keep him here, standing in this spot, as if to prevent him from disappearing. Her hand was shaking, but Sasuke didn't move as her finger hooked under the hemmed fabric. The clouds opened up again, and when the moonlight fell upon Sasuke's features, Sakura met his eyes. They were unyielding onyx, firm with resolution. My answer is still the same as before. I still can't be with you. I have to leave. I have to do this. I know you do, she responded, dropping his sleeve. Turning, She walked a few steps ahead of him and reached for the bag that lay in the shadow of nearby tree. Slipping the pack onto her back, she rotated back towards him. That's why I'm coming with you. Comma dot. Comma dot. Comma dot. Sasuke's calm, determined expression dissolved as he caught sight of the travel sack she slipped on. Her words formed in his mind, and he nearly exploded. You're not coming, he frowned. Sasuke was trying his best to think rationally, but the sight of Sakura standing fiercely, arms crossed, had Sasuke breathing hard with panic in his chest. Now was not the time for this. What are you going to do to stop me? Knock me out and leave me on that bench again? It was almost a challenge. I'm considering it, he snapped, closing the distance between them. She stared up at him, hands coming to rest on her hips. Go ahead and try it. I'm not some helpless little girl you can leave behind, anymore. It took him a heated minute to focus. Suddenly, he was faced with a situation he didn't know how to handle. He was going to be searching for evidence for the most powerful race in the universe. It was a very difficult journey and he was constantly having to stay on his guard. Not only this, but just by being with him, an Uchiha would put a huge target on Sakura's back. What if something happened to her because of him? This was his greatest fear. He couldn't lose any of his loved ones again. No, he spoke firmly, shaking his head. It's too dangerous. I want you to stay here, where it's safe. She laughed, and the small noise made Sasuke nervous in a way that infuriated him. Actually, she smiled, pulling something out from the side compartment of the bag she carried. Between her fingers, she held out a scroll for him to see. It was read with words, A rank, scribbled in black ink across the top. I'm a Jonin, now. I have my own mission to fulfill along the way. Sasuke glared at the scroll she was concealing back into its special place, as if it were to blame for this entire inconvenience. What the hell was Kakashi thinking? Did he really give her permission to accompany him? Why would he do that? It's my turn for my own journey, she beamed again, adjusting the pack on her shoulders. I'm leaving the village either way. I understand if you want to do this on your own. But I'd hoped we could do this together, so we aren't alone anymore. Sasuke ran his fingers through his hair. God, she was annoying. An annoying, frustrating woman who was making Sasuke's stomach do somersaults. Sasuke undoubtedly did not want her to come. He was afraid of putting her in danger. He should have told her no, he should have walked away at that very moment. But he couldn't. Words from the past whispered to him in her sobbing voice. You told me that day, what a painful thing solitude can be. I understand that pain, now. I have a family and friends, but if you were gone, Sasuke, it would be the same thing for me, as being all alone. It nearly broke his resolve, the thought of her feeling completely alone, just as he had for his entire life. Sasuke had come to terms with the loneliness that came with the responsibility of finding the Otsutsuki clan. But, if Sakura were there, if only for a little while, could he escape that eternal loneliness? The thought was tempting, and his longing overwhelmed his dread. Knowing he would regret it the moment he did this, he huffed crossly and grabbed onto Sakura's travel pack, lifting it carefully off her shoulders and roughly hooking his only arm through one of the straps. I'll take this. You're just going to slow us down with it. Sakura's face lit up as Sasuke began to walk forward, not even waiting for her. She immediately followed him, catching up to peer around at his expression. You really mean it? I can come. Don't make me regret it, he said unfeelingly, trying to figure out if she would have even taken no for an answer. And don't get in my way. Sakura wasn't listening. His pink-haired teammate was glowing and smiling mutely to herself. It was going to take Sasuke some considerable effort to get used to having her on missions with him, all over again. The old Sasuke wouldn't have been looking forward to the second chance.